Hey, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. We got a lot to talk about today. We are hoping that Zack Smith, attorney for the Heritage Foundation, is going to be able to join us to talk about a couple of these Supreme Court cases. He was scheduled to come on earlier. We were going to go live earlier, but he's a constitutional attorney for the Heritage Foundation. So you can imagine that his phone is blowing up. Okay. But nonetheless, we got so much to talk about, so much that is needed to be talked about. I've got more videos that I want to play you for today, but I do want to talk about SCOTUS woes and Soros foes and what the left is still up to. Remember, the left never stops fighting. The left never stops campaigning. One of the things that I've said, if you guys have heard me on air, whether it's filling in for Dennis Prager, Larry Elder, Mike Gallagher, sometimes I'm jealous of the Democrat Party because they never stop fighting. They never stop fighting. Even when they lose, they figure out how to win. What's different is they have a former Democrat that is now a common sense conservative in the White House by the name of Donald J. Trump that knows their games. And the guy is great at framing narratives and putting the left on defense. But the Supreme Court of the United States has given the left legs and wings when it comes to this Abigail Garcia case, the wife beater, right, the human trafficker, the drug dealer, the MS-13 member that the Democrat Party are in love with, the guy that they're confused or they'd like to see as the next pope. I mean, it's insane. But the left is starting to shift their narrative. They're talking about due process, due process, due process. So that's one of the things that I want to get into with Zack Smith of the Heritage Foundation. So hopefully he will be able to join us again with this case on parents' rights when it comes to LGBTQ. That case was presented oral arguments in the Supreme Court of the United States as well today. So you can imagine his day got extremely busy. Let me just read you just a brief synopsis from Just the News about the Supreme Court case that we heard earlier today. I also want to talk to you about Kristi Noem. It wasn't a big story or a big deal to me, at least, when I heard that Kristi Noem's purse initially got stolen. And then I started reading the details and I'm like, okay, this ain't good. All right. This is just absolutely insane what happened to the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. I'm not sure what's happening with the Secret Service. And frankly, I'm not sure why, when you're in Washington, D.C., you wouldn't keep your head on a swivel, period. But I'm not exactly sure how someone could just walk up to you and nab your purse. I don't know, with Secret Service detail and a high level of Secret Service detail. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what's going on with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. For now, the White House is sticking with them, and I think they should. And I'll tell you why. Hopefully, there won't be more trickle out news coming out about him, because if that is the case, then they won't be able to stick with him. But I think this is an onslaught by the mainstream media, by the left, by the establishment to get Pete Hegseth out. And I know there's a lot of conservatives out there opining, well, there's some guys that he brought in that he trusted. Well, maybe he vetted them. Maybe he was wrong about them. I don't know why that doesn't cross people's mind. Maybe he thought they were solid. Maybe he went in and said, guys, all right, this is the agenda that we're fulfilling under President Trump. And when they saw some things that they didn't like, perhaps they decided to speak out. Perhaps they decided to leak. And so I don't know why this is so confusing, but I guess, I guess there's reason to take pause. I can understand why people might be confused, but frankly, when it comes to the Department of Defense, even if they're people that are friendly with Pete Hegseth, if they have a different vision of where the Department of Defense should go, I expect there's going to be a lot of controversy. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, they're shaking up the State Department. We got some video for you on that. You've got RFK Jr. shaking up the HHS. We're getting rid of the red dye in the foods. And there's all types of claims that these things are linked to cancer, autism, perhaps. I'm not sure how much is definitive. We do know that other countries don't use a lot of these dyes that are petroleum based. So RFK Jr., his team came out, Dr. Marty Makari the FDA came out and made some announcements about that. So there is a lot of winning going on, but there's a lot of fighting going on too. There's a lot of resistance going on. So we moved from lawfare early on in the Trump administration, or actually during the campaign season. We moved from lawfare. I believe we're in the judge fair. Now, there's some legitimate attorneys that have made the case that perhaps President Trump has just upset the apple cart, and even the Supreme Court justices who initially gave Trump a victory and with the Alien Enemies Act, and now all of a sudden they block these deportations of these Venezuelan gang members, and it's like, ¿por qué? What's going on? What's happening? Is it just because, as one district judge has said, the DOJ hasn't given us sufficient reason to allow the Trump administration to continue to deport? You have the left now out with the narrative, due process, due process, due process. Like I mentioned, man, so much to get to, so much to get to. But I do want to know this, and I'll ask Zack Smith if we do get him on, and hopefully we will get him on. What due process case did these federal district judges hear? What due process case did the Supreme Court of the United States hear when the auto pin and Biden, the Biden administration and his team, and whomever was running the White House at the time during his tenure? Anyway, I'd really like to know. I'd really like to know what was going on then. What was the due process for allowing all of these illegal aliens to come into our country? Here's a Supreme Court case that hit today, and I think that's it's very important. And by the way, I've got some video of Representative Nancy Mace that I think will go along go along with this to some degree. And we'll talk about that. We'll show that as well. Gabe, if you could get cut number 24 ready. But the Supreme Court on Tuesday, which obviously is today, appeared likely to rule in favor of Maryland parents who have objections to LGBTQ content in elementary schools in Montgomery County. Now, why would there be LGBTQ curriculum or content in elementary schools in Montgomery County in Maryland? Why would any teachers want to do that? Why would any teachers want to do it? And why would any school board want this type of curriculum, want these types of books in elementary schools? Guys, it's because the left continues to campaign. The left continues to figure out. They're almost like the Chinese in some sense. We look at some of the AOCs of the world. We look at the Jasmine Crockett's. We look at the Maxwell Frost, and we're like, these guys are as dumb as a box of rocks. But at the same time, the way the left works, I got to give them credit. They're always on the move. They're always marching. And what they're trying to do is bring up young Democrats. It's no different than all of these stories are connected. Oftentimes we'll talk about these stories in the media and it's, oh, this story, or, oh, it's this story, you know, oh, it's about the borders. Oh, it's about the Department of Education. Oh, it's about the deep state. No, they're all interconnected. All of these people want a one world government. All of these people want a deep state. All of these people want to be in charge of our government. They don't want we, the people, in charge of the government. And what they have to do, since the left loves killing babies, what they have to do is brainwash your babies. Since the left loves killing babies, what they have to do is bring illegal aliens into our country and use them as a perpetual underclass. This is what the left does. This is who the left is. And we've got to be mindful of that. I got to tell you, this block on this deportation order from the Supreme Court of the United States is huge. Let me go on with this story. Again, the court heard these oral arguments from lawyers who represented parents who argued the county's Board of Education violated their religious rights by allowing stories about gay and transgender characters in elementary schools. A ruling is expected in June. All right. So Orthodox Christian and Muslim parents alike together argued that children should be able to opt out of the English language arts curriculum. They should be able to opt out. And that is the question before the Supreme Court of the United States. But let me ask you a question. Why is this trash taught in our schools? What happened to reading, writing, arithmetic? What happened to that? Why do we want to sexualize children? Why are we doing this? There's no telling what perverts are going to be able to take advantage of these kids. There's no telling what we're doing to destroy their ability to have decent relationships as they grow older. And there's no doubt about it. What the left is doing too is brainwashing these children to become leftists. What they're trying to do is create a new voter base with your children. See, here's the deal. They can turn your children against you by telling your children, "Hey, you're gay. Hey, I know you're a boy, but you're really a girl. I know you're a girl, but you're really a boy." And then when you try to teach them traditional values, they turn on you. That's what's happening. And if the Supreme Court doesn't stop this nonsense, we're in a world of hurt. We'll be back. You're listening to the Carl Jackson Show. All right, guys, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show. Okay. Welcome to the Carl Jackson Show. Again, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. We are hoping for our guest, Zack Smith of the Heritage Foundation, to be able to join us. He's become very busy in lieu of the Supreme Court cases, the oral arguments that were heard today, the LGBTQ case, which I'm going over right now. We'll also be talking about this, the Supreme Court, and why they blocked the Venezuelan gang deportations. Or actually, I don't know the reason why per se. I'm a little frustrated that they did. I'm hoping to get a little more clarity. I hear what they say, but even their reasoning isn't that clear. So I'm hoping Zack Smith, constitutional attorney for the Heritage Foundation, can provide us a little clarity on the matter. And we're waiting on him, so he may plug in with us momentarily. So we will keep you up to date with that. Sorry, my throat is so dry, and I don't know why. All right. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Por favor. The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. X, Instagram, and Facebook, all things social media, at Carl Jackson Show or at The Carl Jackson Show. Okay, now, welcome back to the program. Again, you're listening to the Carl Jackson Show, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. I'll get to Soros momentarily, but we're talking about SCOTUS woes, and we're talking about Soros foes, and we're talking about all the things that are transpiring seemingly in Washington, D.C. The market was down. The left wasn't talking about that, but the market is doing okay as of today, as Trump signals that there are going to be deals, trade deals that are going to be signed soon. And I do agree that, listen, I'm one of these people. I'm a free trade guy. I do believe in fair trade, and sometimes fair trade mean that there will be trade deficits, and that's okay if we're okay with it. If we're still benefiting from it, some way, shape, or form from our friends. Or what have you. But I do believe that these deals need to be done. I do believe that Republicans need to get to as much deregulation. They need to make tax cuts permanent. This stuff needs to happen quick, fast, and in a hurry, because everything that the Trump administration is doing right now, if that isn't done, and if all of these cuts aren't codified into law, all of these things that Doge has exposed, it's all going to be for naught. It's all going to be for naught. I don't want to lose the midterms. And then we have this president that has still a backbone, and all the things that he's trying to accomplish are just out the window, basically. When then the left will be even more emboldened to stop his agenda and to roll over his agenda. I don't want that to happen. And it's going to be about the economy, stupid. Regardless of all the things that we see transpiring right now that I absolutely love from the Trump administration, we all know that when it comes to voting, you're going to get a bunch of weak-kneed Republicans and independents, and they might say if the economy isn't in great shape, they'll look at their wallet, their pocketbook, and they'll say, wait a minute. You said you could turn this stuff around. So this is important. And I think that is going to happen. I think that is going to come. But that's extremely important. All right. So before I get back to this case, wrap up this case. And again, if we get Zack Smith on from the Heritage Foundation, again, a busy man, if we get him on this evening, we'll circle back to this and get him to opine on it. But I want you to watch this video. This is Representative Nancy Mace, who, by the way, at one point in time used to be for quote unquote trans rights, but at some point she's taken a hard turn on that. and now she is standing up against it. I don't know if it was when you guys may recall in the Capitol building, there were a bunch of pro-trans or trans activists that I don't want to incorrectly say that they bust into the Capitol. Maybe they did, and I can't recall how long ago this was, 6 months or more ago. And then they went into the women's bathrooms. Nancy Mace got really upset about that, Representative Nancy Mace, and she has been on a roll on this issue ever since. This has kind of become one of her shticks. So I want you to see video clip number 24, and then I'll take you back to the Supreme Court oral arguments about these LGBTQ books in your children's schools, which is absolutely sickening to me. Only perverts. Let me be clear. Only immoral perverts would want that in your schools. Oh, Carl, you're intolerant. It's about hate. You don't respect our views. What about you respecting mine? What about we do what's best for the children? Why do you want to sexualize little children? It's because you want to brainwash them into the Democrat Party. See, this is how the left thrives. They create new victim boxes. This is what they do. Am I lying? This is what the left does. Hey, you're black. Hey, you're Latino. Hey, you're a white female. Hey, you're LGBTQ. You know what I'm saying? They check off the boxes, and then what they do is they make those people in those boxes mad, and then they say, "I'll champion your cause." We've got a man that is a certified penis owner that thinks he's a woman. I'll champion your cause. That's what they're doing to your children. They're making your children a voting block with this sickness, and it is absolutely disgusting. Clip number 24, por favor, Gabe.
Does your husband call you babe?
I'm not married.
Okay, so even better.
I don't care.
Okay, so I would like for you to apologize because that is derogatory. And second of all,
Is tranny derogatory to you?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course the fucking is.
Tranny. Yeah, tranny. If that's derogatory,
You are representing her. I'm sorry.
Okay, excuse the language. Hopefully, we'll bleep that out later for the podcast. I forgot about that part. But did you, Gabe? Did you notice that dude's voice? But did you see the voice change? Was that demonic seeming or what? That was insane. That was insane. Here you had this dude cosplaying, pretending to be a woman, upset that Nancy Mace is calling him a tranny. Calling him a tranny. He's talking like a woman, sounding almost like a woman. And then when she refuses to apologize to a man that obviously has delusions, the man rises up in him. You want me to legitimize that? You know, I've heard some conservatives, libertarians say, hey, you know what? Listen, when it comes to our children, hands off, don't mutilate their bodies. But when it comes to adults that are delusional and sick like that, do all you can for them. I disagree with that. I disagree with that vehemently. I don't think that you should send people that are obviously mentally ill in under the doctor's knife to mutilate themselves when it is clear their minds are distorted on this issue. Now, this is what the left wants to do to your kids. Getting back to this case really quickly here. So again, you had Orthodox Christian and Muslim parents that are arguing that children should be able to opt out of the English language arts curriculum. You had conservative leaning justice. I hate when they say conservative leaning. It's not conservative leaning. It's constitutional leaning. Constitutional leaning Justice Kavanaugh and John Roberts appeared skeptical of why the school board was arguing it couldn't allow the opt-outs. Now, I got to be honest with you. I don't know what to call John Roberts. Sometimes I call him a liberal on the bench, but sometimes he rules and he rules well. He's asking good questions here when it comes to the issue of parents opting their children out. He said, is that a realistic concept when you are talking about a 5-year-old? Asked Robert, part of the high court 6-3 conservative. So is that a realistic concept? And then again, you had Kavanaugh and Roberts appeared skeptical why the school board was arguing it couldn't allow the opt-outs. That's insane. Get rid of this school board if possible. Parents have to rise up. I mean, your kids should be going to school and they should learn how to read. They should learn how to write. They should learn how to do arithmetic. They should learn how to think critically. I think all the remember. I used to think, okay, I got to a point where sex ed was taught in schools, and I was like, I felt weird about that. And then after a while, I'm like, if parents okay it. But now you see what the left has done, and I'm like, man, I don't know. I'm starting to think, well, all we need to do when it comes to school is focus on. I remember the founders were like reading, writing, arithmetic, basically, and the Word of God, so that we understand why this, how blessed we are. Essentially, I'm going to have to find what I think it was John Quincy Adams that gave a statement as to what he'd like to see in our public schools, and it's like, man. Think about how smart those people were then. I know that we've been able to invent stuff and innovate, and we've gotten tech savvy and all this kind of stuff since then. So we look at those guys as dummies. But the truth of the matter is, the world didn't start to evolve the way or as quickly technologically and all of the entrepreneurship. It didn't exist on the level that it does now until the founding fathers. You guys recall that book that I've told you about, The 5,000-Year Leap? I don't know if Zack Smith is going to be able to join us. I'm hoping he will, but just in case, I'm going to go through some of this. This was a story that I had yesterday where Alito had called the Supreme Court blocks of Venezuelan gang deportations legally questionable. And I'm going to explain to you, at least in my opinion, why what the Supreme Court has done is absolutely devastating. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If you cannot deport illegal alien criminals at breakneck speed, we don't have a border. Despite the fact that there's reports today that border entries are the border is shut down, like 99.5 or whatever percent. The border is effectively shut down. It is no longer open for business. So it's closed. It's closed. But the problem is, we've imported a lot of Democrats into this country. The Biden administration did. And many of them happen to be alien gangsters and criminals. Now, it's amazing to me that the Supreme Court and these federal district judges didn't step in when the Biden administration, when the auto pen was allowing all of these illegal aliens to come into the country, to flood our borders, to fly into our country. For some reason, there wasn't this zeal to stop these illegals from coming in. But all of a sudden, there's zeal from these left-wing radical activist judges to keep them in the United States. ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué? You're listening to the Carl Jackson Show. We'll be back. Oh, wow. All right. Yeah, we can let them in. Hey, Zach. Oh, man, you're looking sharp.
Hey,
you know.
Hey, Carl, you actually get to see me this evening.
Yes. Hey, and we're live as well, just so you know.
Great.
I don't know if you okay. So the
I'll be on my best behavior then.
Just what I was hoping for. All right, perfect. It's so funny, Zach. I was we're on an interim, but people can watch us now or in an interim. But I was talking about I was breaking down and sharing my frustrations with the oral arguments that the Supreme Court heard today about the LGBTQ books and all this kind of stuff. And then I just told the audience that I was going to try to break down how devastating I think this blocking these deportations are by the Supreme Court. And I was like, I'm going to have to try to do it without Zack Smith. And then I get the word that you're here. So audience, you're not disappointed.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm sorry I was running late this evening. I got held up at another meeting, but always enjoy getting to come on.
Hey, not a problem, Zach. We figured, honestly, with all the courts, all the cases that were in the or the oral arguments, I was like, he's going to be pretty busy today.
Yeah, just a few things happening these days.
No kidding. This has been the news never stops. All right, let's get right back to the programming. Welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. Again, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. I am now joined by Zack Smith. You guys get to see him live, perhaps many of you, for the first time. So, Zack Smith, constitutional attorney for the Heritage Foundation. Zack, thank you for joining us this evening.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Okay, Zack. So let me get your opinion on the oral arguments that the Supreme Court heard today over these LGBTQ books that are, I guess, allowed in Maryland, in this Maryland school district. I mean, just sick books. I don't know why we won't stick to reading, writing, arithmetic, and critical thinking, except that I think the left wants to brainwash our children as early as possible and create other victim groups. So, give us your take on the hearing today about these LGBTQ books, and and hopefully parents gaining some favor to be able to opt their kids out of
Right.
these lessons.
Well, this reminds me of the situation a few years ago, Carl, where you may remember Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida held a press conference where he simply read books that were available to elementary, middle school, and high school students in Florida. And the content of those books was so graphic that the live news feed actually had to be cut. The local news station said they were uncomfortable carrying this type of material being read live on air. And yet, these are the same books that are available to students, very young students, as far down as elementary school. And so this is a very real problem, despite what many on the left might want us to believe, that unfortunately young children are having access to very graphic, very age inappropriate books that frankly I don't think probably you or I or anyone over 40 should read in public among decent company. But look, here's the fundamental issue at stake in this case that was argued at the Supreme Court today. And I think this is an important point, Carl. The Montgomery County in Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C., the proponents of this law, they basically have said, not only are we going to teach this radical gender ideology to your students, but fundamentally, we are not going to allow parents to opt their children out of being exposed to this curriculum. So not only are they pushing this radical sexualization of children, they are refusing to allow parents to opt their own children out of being exposed to this often pornographic type content and materials. And so that is the issue that the court is being asked to decide. It's simply not whether or not school officials can teach this material, but simply whether parents can opt their own students out of being exposed to this material. Now, the school officials in Maryland, they are arguing that by having enough students opt out, it will essentially undermine the purposes of the program, that it'll make their pedagogy ineffective. But this is scary stuff, Carl, where we're seeing more and more efforts by those on the left to undermine the rights of parents to control the content that their children are exposed to.
This is why school choice, in my opinion, is just absolutely crucial. You're going to have, and Zach, listen. I mean, you come at this from a legal angle, but I got to tell you, I mean, as a parent who sent our kid, and I worked my butt off. My daughter went to public school, and then I worked my butt off to send her to private school, and we were broke as a joke. I mean, it was literally all we could afford to do, and hardly anything else. But that was a sacrifice that we made, and then we did a little homeschooling, a little homeschooling as well. But I got to tell you, I'm thinking about these adults that are reading these books in front of these kids, and I'm like, there is something that is morally bankrupt and insane about that. I can't imagine, and I hate to even think this, but I can't imagine that doesn't awaken some type of sexual perversion inside of an adult that's reading this type of crap to a kid.
Well, look, here's what I can say, Carl. I think many parents, as you rightly point out, do not want their children, particularly their very young children, exposed to these often very difficult, very sensitive conversations, particularly at a very young age where they can often be confused easily, particularly where they may not be getting both sides of the story at a minimum. And so, what's interesting is you see a wide coalition of Christian parents, Jewish parents, Muslim parents, secular leaning parents all coming together, agreeing that fundamentally parents should have the right to control the content of their children's education, or at least what content their own children are exposed to,
Sure.
instead of government bureaucrats trying to dictate how and when and in what manner children will be exposed to this very graphic material.
If you had to make a guess, here, Zach, again, I'm speaking to Zach Smith, constitutional attorney at the Heritage Foundation. You can find his writings at the dailysignal.com, heritage.org. You can find him on X at TZ Smith, at TZ Smith. Where do you think the Supreme Court will land on this? Again, I know they won't have their decision until June, so we've got a little time, but where do you think they're leaning?
Well, I only got to listen to portions of the oral argument today, so I still have to go back and listen to the argument in its entirety. But certainly the portions that I listened to seem to indicate to me, and I'm always hesitant to read the tea leaves, that can be
Yeah.
tough to do sometimes, but it certainly seemed like the justices were sympathetic to the arguments that the parents were making. I mean, just from a human perspective, keep in mind that most of the justices are themselves parents, and also keep in mind that there is a long line of Supreme Court precedent saying that parents do, in fact, have very broad leeway in controlling the upbringing of their children and the content to which their children are exposed in an educational setting. And I think that's worth emphasizing again, Carl, just how aggressive and how absurd the government's argument is in this case. They are objecting to parents simply being able to remove their children from the educational setting while this graphic content is being taught. The parents aren't even objecting to the ability of these school
Right.
officials to teach this content. They're simply saying, if you teach it, then we do not want our children exposed to that. And that is what the government is saying these parents do not have the power to do. It's scary stuff all around.
I briefly heard Justice Kagan mention something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing because I literally heard it just in passing. But her concern was, well, if we let parents opt out here, then they may choose to opt out on some other lesson that may be. I'm like, are you? I mean, Kagan. I think Kagan. Listen, I disagree with Kagan, but I tend to believe that she's a smarter liberal. That was one of the dumbest statements I've ever heard. I'm
well,
like, are you kidding me?
Well, from a policy perspective, it certainly doesn't sound that bad to me. But keep in mind, courts are not supposed to do policy, Carl. They're supposed to do law. I think we have too many
Good.
judges in our country today that have forgotten that very important principle. But fundamentally, whether you think this is good policy or bad policy, we're talking about the legal rights, the legal ability of parents to control the upbringing of their own children. And again, there's a long line of Supreme Court cases saying that, in fact, parents do have very broad leeway. The other thing I'll flag very quickly for your listeners, this could be a very important case because, yes, this deals very narrowly with the educational setting there in Maryland, but keep in mind, you have legislators in Colorado now trying to essentially criminalize or threatening to take
That's
away a parent's
right.
child if they will not affirm that child's gender selection, if that child decides that they are transgender. And so this is very, very, again, scary stuff. And you're seeing more and more efforts by those on the left, in particular, to intrude on the ability of parents to raise their own children as they see fit.
Man, I had forgotten all about that situation in Colorado. I mean, talking about a tyrannical government. I mean, that is just absolutely insane. It's like Californians just moved to radical leftists in California just moved to Colorado and they've made that state insane. It's just
Right.
absolutely crazy. Okay. We just have 2 minutes left in this block, and hopefully you can stay with me for one more.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about this. I just read in the Epic Times, Alito calls Supreme Court block of Venezuelan gang deportations legally questionable. I have Alito's dissent in front of me, but we just have a couple of minutes in this block, so I'll perhaps read it afterwards. But just give us your take on this particular, at least temporary ruling, because I agree with Alito and Justice Clarence
Yeah.
Thomas. Frankly, I think this is devastating for Trump's border policy. Frankly, what's your take?
Well, I think that's to be determined. What I think it's devastating for is the courts, the Article 3 courts of our federal government, to maintain their legitimacy in the American people's minds. And I don't say that lightly because I think many people are looking at the courts, they're hearing a lot of the chatter about these judges exercising questionable jurisdiction, about these judges ordering billions of dollars to be released, about these judges ordering bureaucrats to be rehired, impinging potentially on the president's Article 2 powers and ordering these actions to be taken in very short order. And so I think in this case in particular, Carl, it may be important to back up and understand some of the broader settings, how we got to this point. But look, the way this case and the speed at which this case made its way to the US Supreme Court is absolutely unprecedented in modern history. And I think if you read closely what Justice Alito, joined by Justice Thomas, was saying, essentially he was saying this is no way to run a railroad and that the Chief Justice and the other justices should be wary of taking this type of action.
Okay, I'm speaking to Zach Smith of the Heritage Foundation, constitutional attorney. Make sure you check him out on X at TZ Smith, at TZ, literally the letter TZ and Smith. And also check out his writings at Daily Signal. I often read his work there. We'll be back with more. I want to follow up with Zach on this particular Supreme Court case. You are listening to the Carl Jackson Show. All right, guys, for all of you that are tuning in, I appreciate you watching. You are listening to the Carl Jackson Show. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. No, I'm sorry. I was going to give you the social media. All right, social media, X, Instagram, and Facebook. Why don't I do that? Or so I'll start there. At Carl Jackson Show, at The Carl Jackson Show. You'll find me at one of those places. All things when it comes to the podcast, The Carl Jackson Show. We're on the Salem Podcast Network. We're on YouTube, Rumble Live. For those of you that are watching, thank you so much. And wherever you go to get your podcast, The Carl Jackson Show. And I do want to talk to you about a mega sale that My Pillow is currently having. So My Pillow is excited to announce that they are extending the mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products as well. This is your chance to grab incredible deals on some of My Pillow's most popular and newly released items. For example, you'll be able to save $40 on the new spring My Pillow bed sheets, available in any size and any color. Mother's Day is coming up, fellas. These luxurious sheets are designed for maximum comfort and breathability. They're perfect for a great night's sleep. Looking for a meaningful gift, you can save 30% on the brand new Mike crosses that are inspired by the one that you've seen Mike Lindell wear for over 20 years. These beautifully crafted crosses come in both men's and women's designs, and they're proudly made in the USA. So get the 6-piece bath or kitchen towel sets for just $39.98. Initial quantities are extremely limited, so do not wait. And don't forget, the best-selling standard My Pillow is now just $17.98. That's almost like you're robbing My Pillow, just the way that our Department of Homeland Security Secretary was robbed. That was insane. Plus, orders over $75 ship for free. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Carl, CARL, or call 800-858-0263. Okay, let me get back to my guest. I'm speaking to Zach Smith, constitutional attorney at the Heritage Foundation, and we're talking about right now the Supreme Court case where SCOTUS blocked the deportation of Venezuelan gang members. Obviously, we have the story with this Garcia guy, this alleged MS-13 gang member. I believe he is one, quite frankly, this wife beater, this human trafficker that the left is championing right now. Although I see that they've switched up their narrative to make sure that they're not just talking about him and they're talking about due process. Zach, could I get you to opine on that? Because I've seen, as the left has been bashed, I thought they were going to ask if this guy could be the next pope, Zach. It was getting so bad. I'm like, I guess they want this guy to be the next pope. I mean, it's insane. But I did notice that they're starting to change the narrative. No. It's not about this guy. It's about due process. I guess what I want to know, Zach, where was the due process? I don't understand due process for people that invaded our country. Where were these district judges when Biden had our borders wide open? I'm getting a little frustrated with this argument. How do you respond to these people that say, no, it's about the due process? It's not about this MS-13 wife beater, human trafficker that we've been championing.
Well, I think that's a fair question, Carl. And I think we have to back up to earlier this month to understand how we got to this point this weekend, where the Supreme Court, as you mentioned, where Justice Alito laid it out, we're literally in the dead of night, around 1 a.m. Eastern. The court is entering this order that purports to prohibit the Trump administration from deporting any further illegal aliens that fall into certain categories until and unless the Supreme Court rules. So you may remember earlier in April, the court heard a case where essentially these same due process type claims were being raised. Several individuals subject to deportation had filed a suit in Washington, D.C. Judge Boasberg had received that suit and essentially entered an order prohibiting those deportations from moving forward. That case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the
Right.
Supreme Court, in a very terse opinion, said, look, these individuals are entitled to certain types of due process, but it's about what type of process they're entitled to and where they can seek to assert those rights. And the court essentially said that those individuals challenging their deportation had to bring their claims under something known as habeas corpus. Essentially, that's if you allege you're being wrongfully held, you bring what's known as a habeas claim. And typically, you have to bring those habeas claims at the place where you're being held. So in this case, the court said that would be in Texas. So if we fast forward in the Friday before Easter, Good Friday, you have the ACLU filing a motion alleging that a number of individuals are about to be wrongfully deported. They actually had the audacity to file an emergency motion with the district court, give the district court judge a deadline later that day and say, if we don't hear from you by this time, we're going to go up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. They didn't hear from the district judge by the time they set for him. It's really strange to me, Carl, as a lawyer, that you have litigants setting a deadline for the judge to respond by.
Right.
That's typically the other way around with the judge setting the deadlines. But they went to the Fifth Circuit, they went up to the Supreme Court, and you got this really odd order from the Supreme Court, where again, they essentially purported to enjoin the president from taking these further removal actions. And as you mentioned, Justice Alito wrote a very powerful dissent, joined by Justice Thomas, questioning the Supreme Court's ability to take these actions. And what's ironic, Carl, is that the district court, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, when they were finally able to rule on this motion by the ACLU, they actually denied the ACLU's claims. And yet you had the Supreme Court stepping in and essentially handcuffing the president's abilities to take certain actions with respect to an entire class of people that are potentially eligible to be deported. So we'll have to wait to see how this plays out. Briefing in this case is still ongoing, but I do agree with you. I certainly think that Justice Alito's dissent in that case is well worth a read for all of your listeners.
Let me read that, and then I want to share with you, Zach, what I'm really concerned about, and why I think this is a bigger blow than conservatives would want to admit, outside of the legal realm. But anyway, here's Alito's dissent, and I'm quoting. In some, literally in the middle of the night, the court issued unprecedented and legally questionable relief without giving the lower courts a chance to rule, without hearing the opposing party, within 8 hours of receiving the application, with dubious factual support for its order, and without providing any explanation for its order. It's insane. I refuse to join the court's order because we had no good reason to think that, under the circumstances, issuing an order at midnight was necessary or appropriate. He goes on. Both the executive and the judiciary have an obligation to follow the law. The executive must proceed under the terms of our order in Trump versus JGG, and this court should follow established procedures. The justice has acted even though it is not clear the court had jurisdiction, he wrote, or the authority to hear the case. And in Trump versus JGG, which was just a couple of weeks ago, the president's request to pause, I guess that was Boasberg's order preventing his administration from using the Alien Enemies Act, was the Trump administration won. But now the court steps in, unprecedented, and says, wait a minute, we have to stop these deportations. I heard an attorney argue, Zach, that maybe some of these justices, including Amy Coney Barrett, are just concerned about the process, and they're upset about how Trump is treating the process. I don't know if that's true or not, but here's my other concern. If we're trying to get criminal, illegal aliens out of this country, I'm not going to be as concerned anymore if this judge fair keeps happening, if I'm one of these illegal alien criminals.
Well, I certainly think that judges overstepping their proper bounds should be a grave concern to us all. I think that's why you're seeing legislation being proposed in Congress right now by Chuck Grassley, Mike Lee, and others to try to rein in some of this judicial lawfare we're seeing right now by these federal district court judges around the country who are entering nationwide injunctions that they often have very questionable authority to enter. But look, even if these justices are concerned with the procedures surrounding these deportations, John Sauer, who was recently confirmed as the president's Solicitor General, filed a brief saying that the Supreme Court needs to clarify its order in certain important respects. Because right now, the order as issued is very unclear, it's worded very broadly. And at a minimum, John Sauer asked the court to clarify that the Trump administration can proceed with deporting illegal aliens under other immigration laws, even if they may not be able to do so temporarily under this Alien Enemies Act provision. That's a very important clarification that the Supreme Court should make happen as soon as possible. But look, I don't think we've heard the final word on this, Carl. We're going to continue to see litigation on this front. And again, it'll be interesting to see how Congress responds now that they too are being asked to step in and rein in some of these very aggressive cases of judicial overreach that we've seen from judges around the country.
Okay, so we have less than a minute left. In audience, I'm going to have to bring you, there's some stories I intended to bring you. I'm going to have to bring those to you tomorrow. I wanted to talk about Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, what's going on with the Soros family, more of their corruption. But I'm going to save that for tomorrow, since we were able to get Zack Smith on. I really wanted to talk about this. I really think that this is a very important issue because there's got to be a remedy. Let me just say this and get you to respond. We only have 20 seconds left. Zack Smith, how is it possible that Democrats get in office and they have legislation ready to go on week one, and Republicans, we have to wait for months as if they don't know what to expect? That's probably a long question. 10
Well, I
seconds.
think what I'll say is President Trump came into office ready to fire on all cylinders this time around. I think he's been much more effective than he
Yeah.
was in his first term. And so we'll have to wait and see how all of this plays out.
Okay. All right. We'll do. Zack Smith, Heritage Foundation. Thank you so much. God bless you,
Of
man.
course. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.